You know that feeling when you stare at your phone, wondering whether you should send another message? You tell yourself, not this time. If they want to talk, they'll text me first. So you wait. A few hours pass, then a day, maybe even a week. Before long, you're asking yourself a question that feels much bigger than a simple text. If I stop reaching out, will this relationship disappear? Most people think they already know the answer. They assume that people who never text first simply don't care enough. But psychology suggests something far more interesting. In many cases, silence has very little to do with how much someone values you. Sometimes it's hiding a completely different story. Psychologists have noticed for years that communication isn't just about words. It's shaped by personality, past experiences, emotional habits, and invisible fears. Two people can care about each other equally while having completely different instincts about who should start a conversation. One person sends a quick "hey" without thinking twice, another types the same message, reads it 3 times, and deletes it before pressing send. Imagine two close friends. One checks in every few days, while the other almost never starts the conversation. Yet whenever they do talk, the quieter friend is warm, engaged, and genuinely happy to hear from you. From the outside, it seems obvious who cares more. But what if the silent friend has been opening the chat every day, wondering how you're doing, and still can't bring themselves to send the first message? One hidden reason is surprisingly simple. Some people don't see texting first as starting a conversation. They see it as interrupting someone else's life. Before sending even a short message, their mind asks questions they barely notice anymore. What if they're busy? What if I'm bothering them? What if they don't actually want to talk? Those thoughts happen so automatically that saying nothing feels safer than taking the risk. Ironically, the people who worry the most about respecting other people's space often appear emotionally distant. Their silence isn't created by a lack of care, it's created by a fear of becoming unwanted. Unless you've experienced that kind of thinking yourself, it's easy to mistake kindness for indifference, but that's only part of the story. Some people experience silence very differently from others. Many of us have learned to believe that frequent texting is a sign of a healthy relationship, but not everyone measures closeness that way. Picture someone who enjoys spending time alone, focusing on work, reading, or simply living without constantly checking their phone. If a few days pass without hearing from someone they love, they don't automatically assume something is wrong. In their mind, strong relationships don't disappear because of temporary silence. This difference creates countless misunderstandings. One person sees silence as rejection, the other sees it as trust. Neither person is trying to hurt the other, they're simply following different emotional rule books. The mistake is assuming everyone communicates love and friendship the same way. If these ideas resonate with you, consider subscribing. This channel explores the hidden psychology behind everyday human behavior, helping you understand yourself and the people around you on a much deeper level. There's always another hidden pattern waiting to be discovered. Another reason many people never text first comes from painful experiences they've never fully forgotten. Imagine someone who spent years being the friend who always reached out first, planned every meetup, and kept every conversation alive. Eventually, they stopped, not to play games, but because they wanted to know whether anyone would notice. For many people, the answer was heartbreaking. Days passed, weeks passed, nobody reached out. Experiences like that quietly teach the brain an important lesson. Stop chasing people. If they care, they'll come to you. From that moment on, silence becomes a form of protection. They aren't testing people on purpose, they're trying to avoid feeling rejected again. The sad part is that two people can spend weeks waiting for each other to send the first message, while both secretly believe the other has lost interest. Neither realizes they're protecting themselves from exactly the same fear. And that's where the psychology becomes even more fascinating. Sometimes the habit of never texting first begins much earlier than adulthood. People who grew up feeling that their emotional needs were ignored often learn to keep those needs to themselves. Instead of saying, "I miss you," they convince themselves they'll be fine. Instead of reaching out, they wait. Over time, this becomes second nature. To everyone else, they appear independent and emotionally strong. But underneath that calm exterior is someone who has simply learned to not expect too much from others. The strange thing is that this coping strategy protects them from disappointment, but it also keeps people at a distance. Relationships grow through small moments of vulnerability. A simple message saying, "How have you been?" can strengthen a connection far more than we realize. Yet for someone carrying old emotional wounds, even sending those few words can feel like taking a much bigger risk than it appears. There's another reason that often goes unnoticed: overthinking. For some people, sending a text isn't a quick decision. It's a long conversation happening inside their own mind. They wonder if the message sounds awkward, if the timing is wrong, or if the other person will even care enough to reply. By the time they've answered all those questions, the moment has passed. They tell themselves they'll send it later. Later becomes tomorrow, and tomorrow quietly becomes next week. If you've ever done this, you've probably blamed yourself for being bad at staying in touch, but it often has less to do with laziness than with fear. The brain is trying to protect you from embarrassment, rejection, or disappointment, even when those fears aren't based on what's happening in the present. Here's another common misunderstanding. We often assume that the person who texts the most must care the most. But think about the people in your own life. There's probably someone who rarely messages you, yet they're always there when you truly need them. And there's probably someone else who sends messages every day, but disappears when life becomes difficult. That difference reveals an important psychological truth. Communication style isn't the same as emotional investment. Some people express care through words, others express it through actions, loyalty, consistency, or simply showing up when it matters. Looking only at texting habits can cause us to overlook the many ways people quietly demonstrate that they care. Perhaps the most surprising reason is also the simplest. Some people never text first because they genuinely believe the relationship is secure. They don't panic after a few quiet days because they assume you'll talk again soon. To them, silence isn't a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that the relationship doesn't need constant reassurance to survive. Of course, this way of thinking can easily clash with someone who sees frequent communication as proof of love or friendship. One person feels forgotten, while the other believes everything is perfectly normal. Neither intends to hurt the other. They're simply interpreting silence through different emotional experiences. This is why understanding psychology is so valuable. The same behavior can come from completely different motivations. Someone who never texts first might be afraid of bothering you. They might be protecting themselves after years of rejection. They might overthink every message they write. Or they might simply feel comfortable enough in the relationship that they don't see silence as a problem. That doesn't mean every silent person secretly cares. Sometimes people truly lose interest, and it's important to recognize that possibility too. But psychology reminds us not to jump to conclusions based on one behavior alone. Human beings are far more complex than a single habit. The next time you notice someone who never starts the conversation, pause before assuming you know the reason. Behind every pattern is a story. Behind every habit is an experience. And behind every silent phone may be emotions that never found the courage to become words. Sometimes the biggest changes don't begin when someone finally sends a message. They begin when we stop judging ourselves and others by appearances and start understanding the hidden emotions that shape our behavior. Once you begin noticing these invisible patterns, you'll see them everywhere, not just in your conversations, but in your friendships, your relationships, and even in yourself. If this video gave you a new perspective, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Are you usually the one who texts first, or do you find yourself waiting for someone else to make the first move? And if you'd like to explore more hidden patterns of human behavior, consider subscribing for future videos. The more we understand ourselves, the more clearly we begin to understand the people around us.